All right, on the podcast this week, we have Cody Fick. He is the Director of Pitching at P3 Performance, which stands for Premier Pitching Performance out of St. Louis, Missouri. We get into technology, pitching assessments, and then Cody gives some pretty cool statistics on some things he's dove into at the end. So hope you enjoy this one with Cody Fick. All right, we now welcome on to the podcast, Cody Fick. Cody, thanks for coming on, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Patrick. Really excited to chat with you and kind of tell P3's story or Premier Pitching Performance's story and get to know you a little bit too.
Yeah, so I know before you were in the role that you're in now at P3, and we'll definitely dive into exactly what that is and things like that. But I saw you were at Evansville as a pitching coach there.
Yeah.
Transition from college to the private sector, pros, cons, like was it more so just tired of the lifestyle more than anything and just the recruiting?
Yeah, so I think that's you know, there's a lot of different ways we can go with that question. The first thing I'll say is like, as a college coach, I wish I had the information and the knowledge and access to tools that I do in the private sector. 5 years ago when I came over to Premier Pitching and Performance, we were just kind of at the beginning of a little bit of that ball flight data wave and things like that. Rapsodo was coming around, TrackMan was coming around, and we hadn't yet seen that stuff, at the mid-major college level a ton. Definitely was something that I wanted to get my hands on and become familiar with and learn how you can use that information to help athletes improve, use that information to identify and evaluate athletes as well. But 5 years ago, when I transitioned from college baseball to the private sector, it was really on the heels of a bad season, and my wife and I just had our first kid. St. Louis was 2 hours closer to home. So my kids were going to be able to see their grandparents more. And the interesting part about it is I first heard of Premier Pitching and Performance in 2014. We had an athlete that I was coaching at the University of Evansville's name's Forrest Herman, who's now a double-A pitching coach with the Baltimore Orioles. But he was actually a guy that in 2014, didn't make our roster coming out of the fall. And, we had to, trim the roster down to 35 guys at that time. And he was the last guy that didn't make it. Obviously those are tough conversations, but he came back a year later and he was way better. And that kind of spurned us to ask some questions. Forrest, what have you been doing over the last year? And he told us about Premier Pitching and Performance, Brian DeLunas, Josh Kiesel, and this program that they had in the St. Louis area that blended pitching development with the performance side in the weight room, and how he really dedicated himself to that over the past year, and kind of reestablished himself as a guy that could help us at the Division I level win a ball game. And so I made it a point to start spending some time with Brian and Josh as my schedule allowed, learning from them just a little bit, and seeing what they had going on. And they were thinking about things at that time a lot differently than most of us in terms of using, weighted implements, the blending of, the strength and conditioning side with the throwing side, assessment-based training, things like that. And so fast forward 2018, I'm looking for a job, and Forrest Herman is now working at Premier Pitching and Performance after his college career underneath Brian DeLunas. Brian's about to take a job with the Seattle Mariners as a bullpen coach, and Brian and Forrest asked me, like, "Hey, would you want to come back and work for us?" So it was interesting. A kid that we had actually, told, like, "Hey, like, you're not a fit for the roster right now," essentially became my boss 4 years later. And I had a lot to learn from Forrest and this side of things, right? Just the access to information, the approach to it, I think is, what drew me to it, the opportunity to eat, sleep, and breathe it, with all different age levels too, right? From, a freshman in high school up to, a big leaguer and kind of see it, through all those different levels. So, the things that I think draw you back to college baseball or being a pitching coach, in the dugout is, laser focused on 12 guys, or 15 or 20 guys, right? Versus, the, systems that it takes to maybe deliver development to, 60, 80 guys, across different levels. I think, we've done a great job, in coaches that come into our facility, getting hired away to the college level and the professional level. And I always think that's one of the draws, right? You immerse yourself in premier pitching performance. You get to eat, sleep, and breathe it. But you are responsible for, more athletes than you would be just on a pitching staff. So to get to take those skills and really pour it into, 20 guys on a college pitching staff, or, a group of guys at a certain level in professional baseball, I think is, one of the main differences, and kind of, not that either is good or bad. It's just, when you put on a hat uniform for a certain team, versus, working in the private sector, I think that's one of the main differences. So yeah, that's a little bit of the story, Patrick, about how I got to P3, kind of, the college coaching background. We've grown a lot since 2018 when I came over here. I've grown a lot since 2013 when I got my first college coaching job, a fresh out of my playing career coach who was young. And, I thought back then, if I could just get kids to compete like me, like I looked at myself as the ultimate competitor. When the lights came on, you cross those lines, you play with a certain intensity, those type of things. But the reality is, like, not everybody operates at that level, right? And I think that's something that takes, a little bit of time to understand and develop. You need a little more dirt in your spike, so to speak, to learn those lessons. And all this other information that we have now at our fingertips helps you connect in different ways to different types of athlete to help them compete at their best kind of, temperature, so to speak.
So a few things. I guess the first thing to learn is, you never know who you're coaching right now, because they could turn out to help you get a job later on down the road.
Yeah.
And then, the other thing is, when it comes to the private sector, I know you talked about how important systems are and things of that nature. And then, but also the technology and some of the things that you're learning there too. What's one thing that you've learned over the past 5 years that if you could go back, you would implement it and it would have helped you a lot as a pitching coach?
Yeah, understanding the individuals more, right? Like creating individual approaches to, how to get hitters out. Like, and again, some of that's just my inexperience whenever I got into the coaching game, right? But understanding that, there are, different strengths that everybody has, right? And you have to play into those more than playing into, just like a certain philosophy, overarching philosophy, right? Get down to that individual level with guys, I think is the big thing. So different type of movers, different type of, pitch quality, strengths, all of those things leading to, what is this guy actually capable on the mound, and making sure you're asking him to do what he's capable. I think that's the biggest thing that I've learned in the past 5 years since being over here. There's a lot of different ways. That's what the assessment, right? Like what can this guy do? What are his tendencies? Making sure that we don't make a suggestion that, pulls him away from a strength. Is it a mechanical thing? Is it a pitch selection thing? Is it a usage thing? Is it a strength and power thing? Right. And just prioritizing those things for the athletes and sending them down the right path and letting them flourish. Those are the things that I think we get into now to just help each athlete be the best version of themselves, instead of trying to fit in guys into, one or two different type of molds, like be an individual, be the best version of yourself.
How do you go about finding out what a pitcher can and can't do? Like, how do you go about finding out if they can't get into certain positions? Is it as simple as just a movement assessment, or is it
Yeah.
more in depth than that?
Yeah, I think a movement screen helps. I think ball flight data tells you a little bit as well. I think the biomechanics piece tells you a little bit. You start to see similarities against certain groups of guys that throw good sliders, right? Guys that create good ride, guys that are sinker guys, right? Like there are different biases that show up, and you kind of look at that and say, okay, like this guy may never be able to carry the fastball. Okay, that's okay. Let's lean into something else that he can do instead of chasing that particular thing. And that's just an example. Or, not everybody should throw a sweeper, right? Some guys are just going to throw better gyro sliders, guys that are more pronation biased. And, if I try to teach him a sweeper, it may take him away from that good carry fastball and, depthy curveball that he already has, right? That's something that I think it's our job to help athletes understand that, one, because I think there's a lot of information out there that they'll go down and things come in and out of vogue that they get exposed to. And it's like, hey, that may work for some guys, but let's see if that actually is a good route for you. Okay. So helping athletes develop a filter too away from, our facility to be able to, digest information, I think is a part of what we do as well. So yeah, that assessment piece is huge in identifying, what's a good path for each guy.
What are some of the things that stick out? I think you'd mentioned just now that there's certain similarities for guys who throw sweepers versus have more ride on the fastball. Like what are some of those from like a physical standpoint?
Yeah. So like, I mean, you just look at, pronation, supination bias, like guys that really pronate are going to have a chance at higher spin efficiencies, be able to carry the ball, in the direction of their spin better. Where supination guys, you're going to cut the fastball a little bit, but maybe be able to lean into that to throw the sweeper. Whereas, those pronation guys may be easier just to, shoot for, a gyro slider that you throw hard and, kind of split the difference between, that and their curveball or something like that. Those are just two examples. I think the other thing you look at, you start to work from the plate backwards, right? Like what does their current arsenal look like? Okay, what mechanics create that? Things like stride direction, things like sequencing, and then go backwards to what are the underlying movement qualities that athlete has in terms of access to range of motion. Do they have hip ER, IR biases? Is there restrictions anywhere that maybe you need to be aware of? They tight, they loose, et cetera. Like all of those things, you try and piece it all together again to make sure you're not asking a guy to do something that he's just not going to be capable of, or it's going to take away from one of his quote unquote superpowers, maybe.
How long of a process does that take you to figure all that out?
Um, I mean, the assessment piece itself is, an hour and a half to 2 hours where, we're lucky we're using markerless motion capture. So we don't have to, put the electrodes on the guys, or whatever. So that piece, as long as it takes them to warm up, get on their throw, we get the data back in 24 hours. But yeah, an hour and a half to 2 hours to take them through that assessment piece. And then our coaches will pour over that information, sit down with the athlete, create a little bit of a deliverable for them, so that we can point them in the right direction. And it's different for different levels of athletes, right? Like based on training age, skill level, things like that. We can, you don't need necessarily an in-depth assessment to communicate with a 16-year-old who weighs 155 pounds that, hey, like we got to be doing the right things in the weight room. We've got to, put on some mass, make sure that we're blending that with a good throwing schedule to keep you healthy, and we can get you better relatively easily. I think the conversations, that get into depth are more with your higher level players that are already have a track record of success that have gotten them to that level, and being really mindful, with pitch recommendations or movement, strategies and things like that.
How many guys are you working with right now?
So across the high school level, we're probably at that, in-house, I would say around 85 different athletes. The college level, it's seasonal. During the summer, it's going to be, 85 to 100, college athletes, pro guys, probably more around that 30 to 40 level right now. That's in-house. Remotely, I think across all levels, we're probably at around 100 guys or something like that. So when you're talking about, delivering information and help at that level to that many athletes, I think you do have to rely on systems, right? It's where it starts with our assessment. And then there's kind of a decision matrix that we'll work through to make sure we're making, as good a decisions from the get-go for those athletes. And then through coaching and communication, making adjustments as needed and not always being, a slave to those initial decisions. I think that's something that we've really done well over the last couple of years, developing those processes, to be able to take an assessment, get to a conversation with an athlete, where we're talking about the right things, and then have what we've talked about show up in a development plan that then we can coach off of and work through. I think that's key. And it's a two-way street, right? Like, we've got to have input. The athlete's got to have input. When you're dealing with a college athlete or a pro athlete, or even, some high school athletes, right? Their coaches and other people that are responsible for their development should have some input. So it's bringing all that together, so that a guy can work on the right stuff and move in a direction that he needs to.
What do you feel like you guys do exceptionally well from a pitching development standpoint, remote training, and just like all the above? Like, usually that there's like one thing that, different companies do extremely, extremely well. Like, what would you say yours is?
I think we try to hang our hat on, taking objective data, subjective observations, blending those two and communicating it in a way that meets the athlete where they're at. Right. I think that is probably what we talk about a ton internally. Okay. Is okay. All of this data is really, really good. And it's great that it makes sense to us at a coaching level. Right. But how do you take that to a coach, to a player, in a way that meets them where they're at, with their verbiage, with their understanding of it, and teach, right? Like, I think that's where we try and hang our hat, because we've got this thing too, Patrick, that's it's our college partnership program, where we take biomechanics and our assessments and any, number of different levels of services to different clubs, right? And all those organizations are at different places with it, right? They know it's important, they value it, right? But some of them have been doing it for a couple of years, and those conversations sound a little bit different than somebody that's just starting out with it and trying to implement it and find its spot for it inside their organization. So I think that's something that I think we do extremely well, is taking that information and meeting people, with it where they're at. Something that I say to an athlete when they come to us year one, right? First time athlete comes to us, that a lot of this first initial, sit down and digestion of the information is going to be me showing you a video and you talking me through what you see, right? Okay. And I'm going to get an understanding of where you're at with what you value and where your eyes go to. That helps me. Okay. And then I'm going to point you back to, the different data points, the different things that we collect, meet you where you're at. Okay. Maybe enhance your value system a little bit with your delivery or your body, your physical attributes, etc. Okay. And then we're going to grow from there. And then I'm going to be interested to see where we're at the next time we do this. Okay. And continue to kind of iron out like what actually matters and what doesn't. Okay. And help you create a connection with it so that whenever you go out and execute a program with us or on your own, right, that there's a deliberateness to it. Okay. That there's no, mindless work getting put on you, just working through a checklist of things that, we laid out in front of you. We want to create a connection there. So I think that's where we do a pretty good job, okay, of taking something that for most people, right, we're just in that progression of, data, biomechanics specifically, okay, where it's still kind of a foreign language, right, for most people. And we want to be part of the, uh, you know, movement to get it into people's hands and help it make sense and be actionable. And, I think that's what we do pretty well.
Yeah, that's actually one of the, I think might have been the first time I had heard of you guys was when I saw, I think UNC Charlotte tweet about it, that you guys were down there doing some assessment stuff on them. So sounds like the college, that thing is pretty cool. What you guys go down and do all the assessments on. I mean, how many different colleges are you guys working with and doing that with?
Yeah, so we're at 12 colleges right now, which is pretty much the most that we would do, right? Again, to be able to provide service and have open lines of communication, for those organizations, 12 is a pretty good number. And it's varying degrees. Some places we go down, we do a full comprehensive assessment, and supplement that for their programs. Other places have pieces of assessments that they like and trust. We may just bring in the biomechanics piece and provide deliverable and consultation on that. It is a very cool piece of what we do because I think it, you know, for us, we're passionate about helping players, right? And we're aligning with college programs that want to give every resource to their pitchers to be able to be the best versions of themselves too. So it really is a partnership in that sense where they can look at their players and say, hey, we're going to bring in some of the best tools, some of the best people, provide you with some of the best information so that you can get better. And that's really what it's all about. So, yeah, I don't know how much those programs want us sharing, who we're working with or what. Some of them are pretty, social media driven and put that stuff out there, and that's great. We'll definitely take the love out there, but some of them don't go that way as well, and kind of want to just keep it under wraps, and us just work with them kind of in anonymity, I guess.
So is it a year long thing? Like I know you said 12 is kind of your max. Is that because throughout the entire year they have access to you guys?
Yeah, so it's during the school year,
Okay.
basically that fall to end of end of season time frame. And again, it's very custom for each organization that we work with, depending on what they need. We always say, like, we're not here to necessarily coach their players. We're here to supplement the needs of their coaching staff, be an extension of that. And it turns out to be a really good relationship where those coaches trust us, and so some of those players may come in over the summer and work with us if they're not going out and playing summer ball somewhere else, and it makes sense to train with us remotely or in house. Yeah, so it's that school year time frame. We go down to the campuses one or two times throughout the year, provide deliverables and consulting services with them beyond those visits. Just about every day of the week, we've got a couple of phone calls scheduled or Zoom scheduled with those coaches to go over the information, or maybe they've got a guy that they want to dive in deeper and see, if there's some of the information that we've collected can help them, with maybe they've, hit a roadblock with a guy or something, and they're just looking for a different set of eyes or a different way to leverage that information. We do that. So yeah, it's pretty cool. Honestly, it's one of the funnest things that we do because it feels like, whenever they get into the season, you can put a ball cap on and root for a club and we always joke like we're waiting for our first team to get to Omaha that we work with, and it's just cool, for our guys, for our culture to kind of have those rooting interests and be like, yeah, we played a small role. Like those kids, those coaches, they put in the work, but we play a small role in what they're trying to build.
What about when it comes to assessing pitchers who are tall versus short? Like, is there any advantage at all? And maybe this is even diving more into the recruiting standpoint too, because we all have biases, and when it comes to different types of pitchers, is there any advantage from what you've seen? Like, does it really matter a whole lot when you get to college how tall a pitcher is?
Yeah, I think it can, right? Again, taking that plate backwards approach, like what, you know, ball velocity, um, movement characteristics, approach angles, things like that. Like we're looking for outliers, right? And
Mhm.
that can come in the form of tall guys. Sometimes it comes in the form of short guys. We look at that whenever we make mechanical suggestions as well. Like, hey, like if we make this adjustment, is it going to take away from one of their superpowers in terms of, release extension, release height, vertical approach of, the baseball coming into the hitting zone? Because everything is related, right? So, yeah, like tall guys can create higher release points, or maybe, more extension if they can move a certain way, right? It's probably a little bit short-sighted just to say tall or short. Probably need to look a little bit deeper into what's happening as far as ball release, vertical approach angles, their mechanics that create those things, and if there's anything you can do to kind of amplify, their height or take advantage of, being short, so to speak. Definitely don't look at it. Short guys can be successful, tall guys can be successful. Not all short guys are, not all tall guys are either.
Would you say that majority though are at least a certain height, or and then there's some outliers on one
Yeah,
end?
I think when you look at uh, rosters, definitely taller, and I think um, when you look at the major leagues, right, a lot of tall pitchers for sure. I think you have to investigate everything because there could be hidden value, with a short guy. Now, it takes extra work to find that, right? And it may just be as simple. Some people may just say, hey, like it's easier just to, you know, use 6'2" as my cutoff and go from there, right? But again, if you're looking at it from maybe a school or organization that doesn't have the luxury of only recruiting 6'2" guys, right? You may have to try and find hidden value, with somebody that's 6 foot or 5'10" and can carry it with a low release, good velocity, and a flat vertical approach, and maybe you can become a guy dominant at the top of the zone, in that way. Again, there's so many factors that go into it. Um, and again, you're just trying to find value somewhere. So just kind of depends on your strategy, I guess, from a recruiting and evaluation standpoint. Um,
What
you
what
know,
would your strategy be if you were going back as a pitching coach now?
yeah, look at the stuff first, right? Like what kind of stuff does he currently have, and is there something there that I can, maybe develop or enhance with that current arsenal? You want guys that are closer to, you know, the their ceiling, I guess, because in today's recruiting world, right, like it's very much a win quickly situation for most places. Um, so any adjustments I want to make, I want to be able to make them, fairly quickly to see return on that for the athlete. I think the athletes want that too. And it kind of depends what level you're at too. Like if you're talking junior college versus mid-major versus high-level Division One, like what type of athletes are you able to, get, and how much time are you going to be able to spend with them to get there? So for me, simply put, look at stuff like what creates swing and miss. You know, um, I want to limit balls in play. I want to limit damage. What pitch qualities are able to, do those things, and then work from there. I mean, that's an oversimplified approach, but I think it's the easiest one that we can kind of build off of. Maybe there's a guy that's not doing something that if I can teach him to do it, I've got some value that maybe isn't seen on the recruiting trail, and that's always an advantage as well.
Yeah, isn't it crazy that, I know you just mentioned that you might probably would be looking for guys closer to their ceiling just because of the win now. Which I mean I definitely understand that. It's interesting though, because or at least it seems in years past it was all about, being projectable and all this and that. And it seems like now you want guys who are filled out more and just ready to go in and roll right away.
Yeah, and the recruiting landscape has changed a lot, because there's a lot of known commodities that hit the portal, and you can make an evaluation of how quickly is that guy going to help me versus an 18-year-old kid, who's maybe, I'm not here to debate whether that's the right way to do it or not, as far as getting guys that are good right now versus guys that could be good in 2 years, right? Because there's plenty of 18-year-old kids that are going to be good. There's plenty of 16-year-old kids out there that are going to be good. But when it comes to, just a more sure thing, like sometimes that guy that's got a track record at that level already makes more sense to kind of go after, I suppose. Luckily, I don't have to deal with that much in my role right now. I get those questions from high school kids all the time, like, what do I have to do to be recruited? I'm like, it's a tough world out there, right? Like, you have to keep getting better, and you have to understand what that path looks like. Oftentimes, it starts in the weight room for those high school athletes, making sure that they're as strong and as explosive, as powerful as they can be. And then they've got to go out and oftentimes be the best player on the field when it comes to a high school baseball game. If you want to play at those highest levels of college baseball, like that's what it takes. And if you're not sure if you're the best player out on the field, that means we've got a lot of work to do. And again, I hate to oversimplify it like that, because I think if you want to play college baseball bad enough, right, there's a spot for you at a lot of different levels. You just have to be willing to put in the work and be willing to go explore those levels. And I talk to our high school guys all the time. It's about extending your runway, right? If you're a 16-year-old kid, okay, you've got a couple years of runway here in high school to figure out where you're going to land as far as college go. And that could be a number of different levels. But once you get there, you've extended the runway. Okay, what are you going to do with your time then? You're not a finished product once you get to college. So keep extending that runway. Professional baseball players come from all different levels. And it's just because guys are at different spots in their development when they do extend that runway. So that's kind of the message that we tell our guys that we work with, and you have to understand that not everybody's going to go play at the highest level of college baseball. Not everybody's destined to be a big leaguer either. It's about the work. It's about the journey. It's about doing what you're supposed to do to get the most out of your abilities.
So Cody, I know, we've been talking a lot about biomechanics and doing some of those assessments and some of the things you guys do. Do you guys do anything on the mental side of the game as well and help guys with that?
We don't right now formally, right? I think the people that we've hired definitely come with a background of helping guys across all levels. We've got a coach in our facility, Jason Imicus, who comes with 20 years of college coaching experience. He's got the most dirt in his spikes out of all of us. He's seen it at some of the highest levels of junior college baseball, Division II baseball. He's coached players of all ability levels, and is able to help guys kind of navigate those ups and downs that come with development, that come with a hard game. Uh, that we all love baseball. So it's I find ourselves a lot of times when it comes to the in-season stuff, right? We kind of joke about this, but we become almost dime store psychologists, right? Like where it's like, hey, like, what are we doing? Like what are we doing to prepare? Okay. How are our, day in, day out routines? How's our preparation? Are we confident when we take the ball? What's our in-game kind of emotional temperature look like? What's our best kind of energy level to go out there and compete with? How's that look? And those conversations take us in a lot of different ways. We tell guys all the time, like after an outing, there's three ways we can look at this and kind of self-evaluate, right? Like the physical side, like how did we prepare? Okay. The statistical side, like how did we execute? The mental side is how did we handle things that are and aren't in our control over the course of an outing, a week, et cetera. We can't control the umpire. We can't control the weather. We can't control if the shortstop, kicks one, all of those things. So like walking guys through those three different ways to self-evaluate and making sure that we're actually focused on the right things when it comes to performance, right? Was it an execution thing? Was it a physical preparedness thing? Was it, that mental side of things? And then we can get into strategies on how to improve, versus wasting time on something that we're actually doing okay at, right?
Mm-hmm.
And neglecting one of those other areas that just need a little more attention, at the current moment.
What are some pitchers that you like watching at the big league level?
Oh man, good question. We're in St. Louis. I'm a Cardinals guy, so Adam Wainwright for the longest time was a guy that one at his peak was a really dominant pitcher, right? Ability to control the strike zone, how to outlier a breaking ball, ability to, kind of control a game, from start to finish. But then honestly, one of the most impressive things was watching that guy when he wasn't at his best, and how he continued to battle, compete, handle himself with the media, his teammates, the fan base, all of those things. I think a lot of clues left behind on what a true professional looks like when he's at his best and when he's, kind of a different version of himself at the end of his career. So to be able to see that, as a fan and so at times up close and personal in St. Louis, I think a lot of things to learn there. And then see him go over into the booth and talk about the difference between a sweeper and a slider during the playoffs here, and be able to take that to fans. At the end of, I think it was 2 seasons ago, and he talked about how they finally got to some of the mechanical things that had happened with him, and with decline of performance. So like, and a guy that started his career a long time ago continued to evolve, compete, use his strengths, be able to talk about pitch design, is what we would call it. Be able to talk about biomechanics is what we would call it, right? And still be a professional, through good and bad, performance. So that's somebody that absolutely have a ton of respect for. Just watching, as a young baseball fan, all the way through the end of his career. Other guys that are kind of at the peak right now, obviously, guys that come out and are Cy Young contenders, the Blake Snells, who, make a huge argument for, hey, stuff is really important, because I think I just read a stat earlier today, walked 99 guys or something like that, but only 12 of them came around to score or something.
Wow.
It's like, okay, like the stuff is obviously really good. You can make an argument like, a lot of walks that he had to deal with, but had the stuff to pitch around it, so it's like more than one way to be a really successful pitcher. It's about knowing yourself. It's about knowing how you're going to get outs and making sure that you've got at least the baseline stuff to get hitters out at the level that you're at. So guys like that enjoy watching. Obviously Max Scherzers, who are super competitors. The Garrett Coles with super stuff. We can learn a lot from those guys. Those are starters. I love turning on the playoff TV and watching relievers that maybe aren't in our market that, all of a sudden you see them like, wow, these guys are really, really special too. Um, the Merrill Kelly story, it was really cool to just see his perseverance and his journey to be pitching, in the big leagues, be a Cy Young candidate and things like that. There's that fan piece of it. There's the pitching coach piece of it. There's the how can you use those guys to help your athletes piece of it. Definitely a big fan of all of those guys.
Awesome. Well, Cody, I appreciate you coming on today. It's been a lot of fun just learning more about you guys. Like I said earlier, I've seen you guys a little bit on just social media, but not a ton. And I'm glad we got to connect and get the word out there a little bit more. Where can people go and find more information out about P3?
Yeah, so our website, premierpitching.com, has a lot of our story on there. On X, our Twitter handle is at Premier Pitching. Same on Instagram at Premier Pitching. Those are our main social media accounts. You can follow along with some of the content we put out, some of our athlete highlights, of athletes that are working with us. Most of all, I'd say get to know our people, hopefully through platforms like yours. We're trying to get the word out there. The people is what make this place really, really special. Not just our current people but people that helped build it and came before us as well. We're very proud of what we do, and we'll continue on in our journey of trying to help athletes. So thanks for having me on, Patrick. I really enjoyed it. Really enjoyed getting to know you. You've got a great platform here, and we're very happy that we were able to be on it.
Thanks.